Hi, my name's Sam Molnar, and I'm here today to talk to you about the IEP and the process that goes behind making one. Um, so, first off, you might be new to an IEP or what it stands for. So, IEP stands for Individualized Educational Plan. This was created in 1975. It started with the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, which required districts to create a special plan for students with special needs, essentially an IEP, so that way the students did not get left behind. In 1990, this changed to the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA, and that is what it currently is right now. In case you didn't know, an IEP is a legal binding document. So anything that happens on this IEP or in these meetings and is written down and signed upon is a legal document. So if you ever need to move forward with anything of that nature, you can use the IEP as reference. Um, Now, you might be wondering, how do you get an IEP or what qualifies for an IEP, and how do you go about getting one if you think your child or your student needs an IEP in school? So, under IDEA, there are 13 categories that can qualify an individual to receive an IEP. Those 13 categories include autism, emotional disturbance, or ED for short, deaf blindness, hearing impairment, deafness itself, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairments, specific learning disabilities, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, or visual impairment. Now, going about getting one of these is, in a roundabout way, it's relatively simple to request one because all you need to do is request an evaluation as a parent. You can go to the school district, say, I would really like to have my child or student evaluated for an IEP, and the district has 60 days to evaluate your child or student and say that either yes, we need to move forward with the process, or no, the data there does not show that the student needs an IEP. Now, parents are not the only person who can request one. If a teacher feels as though a student is falling behind or showing some sort of signs that they need some help, they can also put in a request for an evaluation. They cannot request an IEP though. So they can say, hey, go to their supervisor, bring some work samples, show them that the student is behind the curve or behind where typical students are, to show that we need to do some further testing, possibly bring some reading or some math tests to show where the student falls and that they need to do something to move forward with the student to make sure that they do not get left behind. Just be aware that no testing can be done without your consent. So as the parent, nothing can be done without your consent. So if a teacher feels as though they want to do more teaching or more testing, they need to contact you first, and it has to be written consent. It cannot be a verbal consent over the phone. There needs to be a document that you've signed giving your consent for testing to be done. The school cannot diagnose your child with ADHD, autism, physical or developmental delays. Those all require a medical diagnosis. So if they go in and they say, hey, your child, they have autism, it's no, they can say we think they might, but you have to go to a medical doctor for that to happen. So do not let a school sit there and tell you something. Be sure you go see a doctor to get that diagnosis. Also, the the disability must have an effect on the education. So it must be negatively affecting the child's education in order for them to qualify for the IEP. If it's just something that's there that nobody really knew about and they're still testing way above others, then they're probably not going to qualify. However, if it is showing that it negatively impacts their education, then they need to move forward with that as well. Now, the initial IEP meeting, if all these steps have been met, it must happen within 30 days of the evaluation. That way all the data's fresh, everybody's up to date on everything, and there's no, well, what did we say 2-3 months ago? It's all, the process is moving pretty quickly. Now, once an IEP happens, it's valid for 365 days, or 1 calendar year, if you will. And the next IEP meeting is called an annual review. So 365 days, it's expired. So you need to have your annual review a little bit beforehand, so that way you can meet, create new goals, and sign off on the new one, so that there is a new document for the next school year for that child. Now, when you have one of these IEP meetings, there's a few people who must attend. A special education teacher, a general education teacher, a test data interpreter, a district representative, and a parent. Now, if, like, a lot of special education teachers also can interpret the data properly and have been trained to do so, so that might be a dual role. So you might not have separate people there for both of those, but there should be somebody there who can qualify as each of those roles. Students can be invited as well. After 16, they're actually required to be invited. But if you feel as though your child is capable of being in that meeting and giving quality input and able to listen and partake in it, they can be invited and can be a part of that meeting. Like I said, otherwise, each person does have a role, and if other people are needed, such as a speech language pathologist or an OT of something of that nature, they should be present as well to go over those goals and those roles, as that's their area of expertise. So now, what is in this IEP that you're having a meeting about? Pretty much everything about your child. So first thing that will be present is information, just name, date of birth, district you live in, where they attend school, parents' names, emails, all your standard information. The next step, though, will be a student profile. And in the student profile, you incorporate pretty much everything that is relevant about the student. Their home life, their living situation, who they live with, if they live with multiple people, if they've moved recently, if they've had any recent traumatic events, what they like to do, what they do in their free time, their strengths, their weaknesses, anything that is relevant you need to put in this area. Next, you'll put the present levels. So this will be recent test scores, anything that would qualify to show where they stand in relative to their peers. That needs to be in present level. So if your student is working at a third grade level in mathematics, that needs to be in there, and what was used to determine that they are in a third grade level in mathematics. Also, next you will have the free appropriate public education. So this is also known as the services, so that you know that you are entitled to a free and public education and the services that go along with it. So if your child needs speech, they're required to put that in here. So that way everybody knows who gets this document knows that this student is receiving speech services and this is how many minutes they're supposed to be. You don't want it to say just they receive speech services. You want it to say they are to receive 120 minutes per month of speech services. That way they know that each month the student is to see a speech therapist for a minimum of 120 minutes. If that wants to be broken down into 6 20-minute sessions or 4 30-minute sessions, however that wants to be done, it needs to be at least 120 minutes per month. And the speech therapist and all that should be taking data to record how often they are seeing them and for how long. Next, you're going to see our goals. And one of the things about goals is they should be SMART. That's an acronym for specific, measurable, obtainable, reasonable, and time-bound. You want all of those things to happen for your goal, because otherwise it's not really a goal. It's just kind of like an idea. So you want to be able to take data on it. You want to be able to track the goal, so that way as educators, as administrators, as a parent, everybody can see how the student is progressing and making sure that they are moving forward. Goals can be academic, behavioral, social, or transitional. So there's no real limitations where it has to be a math goal or it has to be a reading goal. It could be something that maybe they act inappropriately in certain situations. You really want that worked on, or they struggle making conversation and you want the speech therapist to work on that. All those qualify as goals. It's not just strictly academics. Next are accommodations and modifications. So anything that your child might need to help them succeed. And the biggest difference is in accommodation is something that you just kind of tweak to help them do the same work as their peers. So nothing real major. It's just instead of reading a book, they listen to the same book. You're not changing the book. It's just how it's received. A modification is going to be a complete change to the work. So everybody in class is doing division, you're doing mathematics, or you're doing addition because we're not there yet. That's a modification. So those are just some differences to keep in mind when you go forward, and those are talked about. Next you're going to see is a transition plan. So when a student turns 16, it is required. So if the student is going to turn 16 within the cycle of the IEP, within those 365 days that IEP is valid, then the transition plan needs to be discussed. And whether it's what's next in life, our goals, are we looking for jobs, are we looking for secondary education, what is the plan post public education? So that needs to be discussed and starts at 16. That way there's time to get it developed and really know where you're going. And the final thing is going to be just signatures and meeting notes. This is just acknowledging that everything that is on this document is approved by all parties signing. You all agreed upon it. You're showing you discussed it. You had the meeting, and any specific notes about the meeting that needs to be written in there. Maybe somebody came in and gave a specific input or anything of that nature, that needs to be in this section as well. So at these meetings, you have one every year. So same place, typically if you're in the same school, you need to have one every year within the calendar year of the IEP. And if you're writing the new IEP, there needs to be new signatures every time. You'll go over everything we just discussed, the goals, the data, the information, make sure it's all up to date, make sure it's current, make sure it's accurate. There shouldn't be anything too surprising at these meetings. The teachers, the administrations, everybody who's involved in the IEP process should be communicating with you throughout the process about their ideas of goals that you want to see, things that services you may need. If you think they need this and they haven't been receiving it, they'll do the testing prior to see if they qualify. All that should be done. So at these meetings, we shouldn't be writing the IEP. The IEP should be pretty much written. There should be a rough draft, and this is just a fine tune to make sure that the wording's correctly, everything's accurate, and what you would like it to be. Throughout the meeting, you might hear this thing called RTI, which is response to intervention, and it might have been done beforehand to see how your student responds. So basically, RTI is a multi-tier approach to the early identification and support of students with learning and behavioral needs. It's pretty simple. It's to help struggling learners. They're provided with interventions of increasing levels to see if they improve their levels of learning. So you can do some more research on that if you'd like, but it's a term you might hear in one of the meetings, and so just don't want you to be completely left in the dark. Just so you know, you do have some rights. Like I said earlier, you do have to give consent to anything that is done. Testing, you have to sign off on the IEPs, all those things, you have to have consent. It is yours. You may disagree. You don't have to leave these meetings saying, okay, well, this is all that they can do for us. You don't. Like, you have rights. You have to agree to it, and they can't finalize that document until you sign it if you're attending these meetings. So you need to be sure that if you disagree, you speak up and try to find some common ground. And finally, you can appeal determinations if you would like. So don't forget that you have that option. There's some great resources out there. Two of them I recommend are specialeducationguide.com. That's specialeducationguide, all one word, .com. Great stuff on there. Goes over the whole IEP process very thoroughly for everybody. And if you need more information about RTIs, rtinetwork.org, all one word again, rtinetwork.org. Great information, gives you a little more in-depth about what RTI entails. So I appreciate you guys listening. If you have any more questions about IEPs or anything, feel free to comment and we'll see if we can get them answered for you. Thanks. Bye.